I grew up in the heart of Chicago, just me and my mom in a cramped two-bedroom apartment that always smelled like fresh laundry and whatever leftovers she could throw together after a long shift. My dad, he bailed before I could even walk, just another ghost in the wind who made promises he had no intention of keeping. But my mom, she was a force of nature. Worked two jobs, still found time to help me with my homework, and somehow never let me feel like we were struggling, even though we were. I was never the smartest kid in school, but I had a knack for figuring things out, especially when it came to fixing things. My mom's old Honda broke down when I was 13, and we couldn't afford a mechanic, so I spent a week watching YouTube tutorials and flipping through a borrowed repair manual. By the time I was done, the car ran smoother than before it broke. That's when I knew this wasn't just a hobby. It was what I was meant to do. By 15, I was working part-time at my Uncle Ray's garage. It wasn't glamorous, mostly sweeping floors and running errands, but I soaked up everything. The older mechanics laughed at first, calling me kid, like I was just a nuisance, but I earned their respect by outworking everyone. At 17, I could rebuild an engine block from scratch. By 18, I was the guy customers asked for by name. And that's where I met Olivia. She drove in with her Audi A4, rolling her eyes as her dad lectured her about responsibility and taking care of what you own. He left her there with the keys, telling her to watch and learn, but I could tell she had zero interest. Still, she stuck around, watching me work, asking questions, not the dumb ones most rich kids ask, but real ones. She wasn't just another entitled daddy's girl, or so I thought. We started dating a few weeks later. Looking back, I think she saw me as her way of rebelling against her family's world of private clubs and dinner parties where people talked more about hedge funds than actual life. To me, she was different. She wasn't repulsed by my grease-stained hands or my second-hand clothes. She laughed at my dumb jokes, rode shotgun in my beat-up Camaro without complaining, and made me believe we were in it together. For a while we were, while I was saving every dime for my dream. Opening a high-end custom garage, she was my biggest cheerleader. Late nights at the shop, bringing me coffee, helping me catalog parts even though she had no idea what she was looking at. She always said she believed in me, that I was meant for something bigger. I thought we were building a future. Then came the night that changed everything. Every year, her family threw a massive charity gala at their mansion, a ridiculous affair where old money clinked champagne glasses and made empty promises to help the less fortunate. Normally, I found an excuse to skip it, but this year, Olivia insisted, said it was important, said her parents were finally warming up to me, that they wanted to see I could fit in. I should have known. I should have seen it coming when I walked into that ballroom and realized I was the only one who didn't belong. I should have noticed how her mother barely acknowledged me, how her father introduced me as Olivia's friend instead of her boyfriend. But what really sealed it was him, Daniel Carter. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, sharp suit, smug smile that came from a lifetime of knowing the world would bend to his will. His family owned Carter Prestige Motors, the biggest luxury car dealership chain in the state. The kind of business that made its fortune overcharging guys like me for things we could fix ourselves. And Olivia's parents practically shoved her into his arms. At dinner, I had to sit there and listen to him brag about revolutionizing the luxury car industry, while Olivia's father nodded approvingly. I clenched my jaw as her mother went on about how Daniel had a vision for the future, how he was already so accomplished. But the worst part? Olivia. Normally, she would have made a joke, rolled her eyes at the pretentious nonsense, but that night, she just smiled, nodding along like she was hanging on to every word. That was the first crack. The real break came weeks later when I found out she'd been meeting Daniel for business discussions. Apparently, he was interested in supporting young talent in the automotive world. Yeah, sure. Then came the text. The one that changed everything. We need to talk. I already knew. But I still let her walk into my apartment, still let her sit on my couch and go through her rehearsed speech about how she needed stability, about how she was thinking about her future. And then she said it. Daniel helped me realize what I really want in life. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stood up, opened the door, and told her to leave. 2 days later, she was all over Instagram, laughing, clinking glasses with Daniel, looking like she had the whole world at her feet. And me? I fell apart. I lost focus at work, made stupid mistakes, Started drinking too much, skipping shifts. One screw-up turned into two, then three. My uncle tried to be patient, but after I botched an expensive restoration job, he had no choice. "You need to get your head straight, kid," he told me, handing me my last paycheck. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at an eviction notice I hadn't even realized had been piling up. My savings? Gone. My dream? Crushed. And the final blow? A week later, I was desperate enough to take a job as a valet at a high-end restaurant downtown. The same kind of place Olivia and her family used to dine at. And that's where it happened. That's where I saw them. Daniel stepped out of his brand-new Porsche, handing me the keys like I was nothing more than a faceless worker. Olivia slid out of the passenger seat in a sleek designer dress, and for a moment, just a moment, her eyes met mine. But she didn't say anything, didn't even acknowledge me. Daniel smirked, digging into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and placed it in my hand. "Take good care of it, yeah?" I stood there, gripping that bill, feeling my entire world collapse. That was my rock bottom. But rock bottom has a way of forcing you to make a choice. You either stay there, broken, humiliated, defeated, or you get up. And I wasn't staying down. The morning after that humiliating moment, I stared at the $100 bill in my hand for what felt like hours. The insult of it burned. It wasn't a tip, it was pity, a final reminder from Daniel Carter that he had won, that Olivia had chosen him, that I was nothing but a cautionary tale for people like them. A guy who had dreams, but not the means. But that bill, that single, crumpled piece of currency, it didn't just represent my failure. It was the last ember of my pride. I taped it to my bedroom wall, not as a keepsake, not as a reminder of loss, but as a promise. That morning, I made a decision. No more feeling sorry for myself. No more drowning in what-ifs. It was time to become the man I was always meant to be. The first step was fixing myself. I'd gained weight, let myself go. My face in the mirror was barely recognizable, puffy from late nights and cheap whiskey, eyes dull from staring at screens instead of engines. I threw away every takeout container in my apartment, deleted every delivery app from my phone, and laced up the old running shoes I hadn't touched since high school. I barely made it 4 blocks before I thought my lungs were going to explode. But I kept going. Every morning, I ran a little farther. Every night, I lifted whatever weights I could scrounge up. I stopped drinking, stopped sulking. Instead, I worked. By day, I took a job at an auto parts store, low pay, but it kept me in the industry. And at night, I studied business courses, marketing strategies, automotive engineering manuals. Every free second was spent sharpening the skills I needed to get back in the game. And then, fate intervened. It happened on a random Wednesday, late in my shift at the auto parts store. A guy walked in, frustrated, looking for a part no one could find, a specialty component for a Lamborghini Murcielago. "Every shop in town says they can't get it," he grumbled, tossing his keys on the counter. I glanced at his car through the window. Midnight black, pristine. Except for the telltale signs of an engine issue he probably didn't even realize he had yet. "I can get it," I told him. He raised a skeptical brow. "Yeah? And how long will it take?" "Depends," I said. "Are you looking for a quick fix, or do you want it done right?" That got his attention. That's the thing about real car guys. They don't care about the price if they trust the mechanic. After a few minutes of talking, I didn't just get him the part. I got his trust. "You know," he mused, eyeing me like he was seeing something more than just a store clerk, "my usual guy has been screwing things up lately. If you ever do side work, I've got a few projects you might be interested in." That was the opening I needed. Within 2 months, I was back under the hood. Word spread fast. Some former clients from my uncle's shop heard I was working again. One job turned into 2, then 5, then 10, and then I found it. The warehouse. Tucked away on the edge of the city, abandoned, but with the bones of something great. High ceilings, open space, a garage bay big enough to handle anything from a classic Mustang to a Bugatti. The owner was a real estate guy in over his head, drowning in debt. I negotiated hard, made a deal that required barely any upfront cash, just a promise that within 6 months, I turned that place into the most exclusive high-performance auto shop in Chicago. I called in every favor I had left. Old mechanics from my uncle's shop, connections I'd made from the auto parts store, even a few guys from the luxury dealership world who were sick of working under corporate management. We worked day and night, ripping up floors, reinforcing lifts, upgrading tools. I barely slept, running on black coffee and sheer determination. Then, one night, I got a message that almost made me quit. It was a picture, Daniel and Olivia, standing in front of my dream car, a custom-tuned McLaren P1, my design. The car I had once sketched out in a notebook back when Olivia and I used to sit in the garage and talk about our future. The caption? Invest in the best. Daniel had stolen my plans. I had told Olivia everything. How I wanted to create a custom tuning program that blended European precision with American muscle. I had outlined every detail, every adjustment, every performance enhancement. And now, Daniel was claiming it as his own. For a moment, I felt the anger creep back in, the weight of my old failures pressing down on my chest. But then, I looked at that $100 bill on my wall, and I smiled. Let them think they've won. Because what was coming next? They'd never see it coming. The rage simmered beneath my skin, but I didn't let it consume me. Not this time. Instead of smashing my phone or drowning myself in cheap whiskey, I got to work. The warehouse was still a skeleton of what it needed to be. The lifts weren't fully installed, the electrical system was half-finished, and the customer lounge was nothing more than a folding chair and a workbench. But I had something far more valuable than a finished shop. I had momentum. I reached out to every contact I had in the car world. Not the corporate types, not the dealership guys playing dress-up as car enthusiasts. I wanted the real ones. The street racers, the collectors, the old-school mechanics who knew how to listen to an engine like it was speaking to them. I told them what I was building. No overpriced dealership nonsense. No corporate fluff. Just elite performance tuning and custom builds for people who actually cared about their machines. The first few weeks were brutal. I had to convince high-end clients to trust a shop that technically didn't even exist yet. I promised results. Guaranteed performance gains. Swore on my reputation that I could make their cars faster, stronger, and better than any dealership ever could. And one by one, they came. The first real test came from a guy named Rico. Owned a Ferrari F8 Tributo but hated how the dealership handled servicing. So they charged him 20 grand for a premium tune-up that barely did anything. I took his keys, ran a full diagnostics check, and within 5 minutes, I found 3 major inefficiencies the dealership completely missed. 2 days later, he came back to pick up his car. The second he hit the throttle, I saw it in his face. The raw excitement, the disbelief that his car had never felt this good before. I've had this thing for 2 years, he said, shaking his head, and it's like I'm driving it for the first time. That was all I needed. Rico was plugged into the Chicago luxury car scene, and once he started talking, the floodgates opened. By the time the shop was fully operational, I had a 3-month waiting list. I hired a small team, just 3 guys at first. People I trusted, people who didn't cut corners. We were working round the clock, fixing problems the dealerships claimed were unfixable, turning high-end cars into machines that actually performed like they were supposed to. And then, just when I thought I had put the past behind me, I got an email. From Olivia Carter. Subject, catching up. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. I hadn't spoken to her since she walked out of my apartment, since she threw away 4 years of my life for a guy with a trust fund and a showroom full of cars he'd never worked on himself. And now? Now she wanted to catch up? I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to a folder labeled Ghosts and went back to work. 2 weeks later, she showed up at the shop. In person. I was in the middle of fine-tuning a twin-turbo Lamborghini Huracan when I heard the voice I hadn't thought about in months. Wow. I turned around, wiping the grease off my hands, and there she was. Olivia. Looking different. The designer outfits were gone, replaced by something much simpler. A fitted blazer, jeans that actually looked like they came from a normal store. Her hair wasn't as perfectly styled, and there was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Hesitation. I said nothing, just waited. She stepped forward, glancing around the shop like she was searching for words. "This is impressive," she finally said. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Did you come here to admire the place, or do you need something?" Her jaw tightened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I saw your name in a magazine," she admitted. "Chicago Auto called you the best high-performance tuning shop in the Midwest." I already knew that, but hearing her say it, that was different. She hesitated again before sighing. I wanted to see how you were doing." I let out a short laugh. "How I'm doing?" I repeated. "Olivia, you made it pretty clear what you thought of my business reality." She flinched at the words. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." She nodded. "About a lot of things." I didn't answer, didn't move, just let the silence stretch between us. And that's when she finally broke. She took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze. "Things with Daniel, they're not what I thought they'd be." There it was, the crack in the foundation. I should have felt smug. I should have reveled in the moment. But all I felt was nothing. Whatever part of me had once cared about Olivia was gone, buried under years of sweat, blood, and work. "You made your choice," I said simply. "And so did I." She looked at me for a long moment, like she was waiting for something. An opening, a moment of weakness, some indication that I still cared. But I didn't. "Take care, Olivia," I said, turning back to the Lamborghini. And just like that, I was done with her. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she would leave, that I would go back to my life, that the past was finally behind me. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Olivia's return wasn't the real problem. Because what happened next, that was going to change everything. Olivia's visit was a distraction, nothing more. A ghost from the past looking for closure she wasn't going to get. I had moved on. My business was growing, my reputation was solid, and my clients were the kind who valued results over empty talk. I didn't think about her again until 2 weeks later, when everything I had built was suddenly under attack. It started with a call from one of my regulars, Rico, the Ferrari guy. "Man, I don't know what's going on," he said, frustration thick in his voice. "I recommended you to a friend of mine, but when he looked up your shop, he found a ton of bad reviews. Like, really bad." I frowned. "Bad how?" He hesitated. "Stuff about how you overcharge, botch jobs, steal parts. Even saw one claiming you scammed a guy out of a 6-figure rebuild and skipped town." I nearly dropped my phone. That was complete bullshit. I pulled up my business listing and felt my stomach twist. Overnight, my shop's review section had turned into a war zone. Dozens of 1-star ratings. People I had never even worked with claiming I had ripped them off, wrecked their cars, or straight up stolen their money. Sabotage. And I had a damn good idea who was behind it. Daniel Carter. This wasn't a coincidence. Not after Olivia showing up. Not after the quiet way she had admitted things weren't going well for them. He was playing dirty, trying to ruin me the same way he had tried to erase me before. I clenched my fists. He wanted a war? Fine. But he had no idea who he was messing with. I didn't respond to the fake reviews. That's what amateurs do. Panic. Fight back publicly. Give their enemies free publicity. Instead, I did what I did best. I worked. I reached out to my actual clients, the ones who knew me, who trusted me. I didn't ask them to write reviews. I just reminded them that they were always welcome at the shop, that we stood by our work. And you know what? They did start writing reviews. Real ones. Detailed ones. Rico posted a video of his Ferrari, listing every single improvement we had made. Another client, a CEO with a McLaren 720S, recorded a full testimonial about how my shop had saved him thousands compared to the dealership. Within a week, the fake reviews were buried under an avalanche of real ones. Daniel had tried to burn my name. Instead, he just made my reputation stronger. But he wasn't done yet, because the next move he made, that was when things got personal. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call. One of my mechanics, Leo, was already at the shop before me. He sounded pissed. "Boss, you need to get down here. Now." I was already in my car. What happened? Someone trashed the place. My heart slammed against my ribs. When I pulled up, I saw the damage immediately. The front windows? Smashed. Graffiti scrawled across the walls. "Scammer. Thief. Liar." Inside, it was worse. Tools stolen. Cars keyed. One of the lifts had been sabotaged, the hydraulics cut. This wasn't random vandalism. This was deliberate. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted to send a message. And I already knew who. Daniel Carter had just made his biggest mistake. He thought he could intimidate me. Thought I'd fold like I did years ago, when I lost everything. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to bury him. And I knew exactly how. I stood in the wreckage of my shop, fists clenched, blood boiling. The shattered glass crunched under my boots as I walked through what was supposed to be my legacy. My guys stood around, silent, waiting for me to say something. Anything. I took a slow breath. I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to win. I turned to Leo. Check the security cameras. He hesitated. Already did. System was wiped. Smart. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. I nodded. Call our clients. Tell them we're still operational. We're handling this. Handling it how? Leo asked, crossing his arms. I didn't answer. Because I had work to do. First, I made a call. Mr. Hendricks, the owner of Titan Financial. The kind of man who didn't just own businesses. He owned the people who ran them. Banks, real estate, investments. If money moved in this city, it moved through him. Years ago, he had come to my shop with a Bugatti Chiron that the dealership had completely screwed up. I had fixed it in 3 hours. He never forgot that. Ah, his deep voice rumbled through the phone. I was just talking about you. Good things, I hope. He chuckled. Of course. What do you need? I didn't hesitate. Information on Carter Prestige Motors. Silence. Then, a thoughtful hum. Now that's interesting. Business or personal? I let the question hang. Very well, he said. I'll send you what I have. Within 2 hours, I had it. Daniel Carter was in trouble. His family's dealership empire was bleeding money. A series of bad investments, luxury car brands pulling their contracts, and, most importantly, his father losing patience. They were desperate, cutting costs, letting go of experienced technicians, and sabotaging competitors. Me. That was why Daniel did this. He saw me as a threat, and he was right. Phase 2. I made another call. This one, to the Chicago Auto Expo. The biggest event of the year for high-end car dealers, collectors, and custom shops. I had been invited before, but I had never accepted. Too busy. Too focused. Now I needed to be there. But I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to own it. I pulled every favor I had left. My guys worked around the clock. We rebuilt the shop in 3 days. Better, stronger, cleaner. The vandalism? Gone. Replaced with perfection. And for the expo? I had something special. A one-of-a-kind supercar. Not a Ferrari. Not a Lamborghini. Something no one expected. A custom-built monster. My design. The night of the expo, I walked in wearing a tailored black suit. Not flashy. Not arrogant. Just sharp. I wasn't alone. Beside me? Emma, former pro racer. My right hand in the shop. And the woman who had shown me what real partnership looked like. As we walked through the venue, heads turned. People whispered. They had all heard about the attack on my shop. About how I had supposedly gone under. And yet, here I was. And then, the moment came. Daniel Carter stood near his family's exhibit, shaking hands, grinning, still playing the role of golden boy. Then he saw me. His smile faltered. Because behind me? My car. A sleek, carbon fiber beast. Twin-turbo V12. Fully custom aerodynamics. A car that would outperform every luxury model in this building. People swarmed my booth. Not his. Journalists. Engineers. Investors. And that's when the real blow landed. Mr. Hendricks appeared at my side. Ah, there you are, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's discuss that partnership opportunity. Daniel's face drained of color. Because now he knew. I wasn't just competing. I was taking everything. The next morning, my inbox was flooded with offers. Sponsorships. Investors. Partnerships. I had one. And Daniel? His father pulled him aside. Right there at the expo. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the look on his face. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was a failure. Checkmate. By the time the expo wrapped up, the tides had shifted completely. The whispers turned into headlines. Underdog mechanic steals the show at Chicago Auto Expo. Elite tuning shop outsmarts corporate dealerships. Carter Prestige Motors faces industry backlash. Every publication that mattered was talking about me. Daniel Carter? He was an afterthought. His father, Richard Carter, had built that empire from the ground up, but he had always viewed Daniel as a liability. A rich kid playing CEO with no real understanding of the industry. And now? Now, in front of the entire world, I had proven it. By the time I left the expo, Daniel's dealerships were hemorrhaging clients. Customers who had once trusted Carter Prestige Motors were now calling my shop, booking appointments for service, upgrades, full builds. I didn't even have to steal his business. He had gifted it to me by playing dirty, and I made damn sure to capitalize on it. A week later, I got a call. I recognized the number immediately. Carter Prestige Motors. I let it ring twice before answering. This is Lucas. A deep sigh on the other end. Then, Lucas, it's Richard Carter, not Daniel. His father, the man who had spent decades turning a single luxury dealership into an empire, and the man who was now watching it fall apart. I assume you already know why I'm calling, he said. I leaned back in my chair, watching my team work on a Ferrari 488 Pista through the office window. I have a pretty good idea. Silence. Then, I'd like to arrange a meeting. I smiled. About. A pause. Then, the words I had been waiting for. Carter Prestige Motors is looking to sell. There it was. He didn't say it outright, but I knew what was happening. His investors were panicking. His brand was damaged beyond repair. The dealerships were losing money faster than they could recover, and he needed a way out before things got worse. I see, I said, keeping my voice calm. And what exactly do you want from me? A longer pause this time. Then, you've built something impressive. Your shop has a reputation that my son failed to maintain. If we were to transition ownership, I believe you could salvage what's left. I almost laughed. Salvage? No, I wasn't here to save Carter Prestige Motors. I was here to replace it. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I don't think we're on the same page. Silence. Then, a quieter voice. Name your price. I exhaled slowly, letting it sink in. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about legacy, and I wasn't about to buy his failure. But I could do something better. 2 days later, I walked into Carter Prestige's flagship dealership. Not as a guest, as a buyer. Richard Carter sat across from me, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. Daniel wasn't there. Coward. I'll make this simple, I said. I'm not buying your company, but I'll take one location. His jaw tensed. One. I nodded. Your downtown Chicago dealership. The biggest one. The one where the wealthiest clients went. For 50 cents on the dollar. He let out a humorless chuckle. That's a joke. No, that's the best offer you're going to get. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. Your brand is dead, Mr. Carter. You're bleeding money. I'm giving you a way out before the banks take everything. He knew it. I knew it. And that's how, 3 weeks later, I took ownership of the Carter Prestige flagship dealership. Not under their name. Under mine. I renamed it Lux Performance Tuning. We kept the high-end clients, the exclusivity, the reputation, but we did it right. No overpricing. No corporate nonsense. Just real mechanics, real results, and a real passion for cars. And Daniel? Well, let's just say, I found out what happened to him a month later. Turns out, Daddy finally cut him off. With the dealership empire collapsing, Richard Carter had to make hard decisions, starting with getting rid of his biggest liability. The last I heard, Daniel Carter was working as a sales rep at a mid-tier dealership in Ohio. Not luxury, not high-end, just basic cars for basic people. Fitting, really. One evening, I was locking up the shop when a familiar voice called my name. I turned, and there she was. Olivia, looking lost. She wasn't wearing designer anymore. No expensive jewelry, no perfectly polished look. Just a woman who had finally realized she'd bet on the wrong future. I heard about what happened, she said, offering a small, uncertain smile. Daniel, his dad, all of it. I nodded, waiting. She hesitated. I guess I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. She shifted, biting her lip. And maybe. She glanced away, then back. Maybe we could. I didn't let her finish. Because Emma walked out right then. My girl. The woman who had stood beside me while I built everything. The one who didn't just believe in my dreams, she built them with me. She slid her arm around my waist, looking Olivia up and down. "No," I said simply. Olivia blinked. "No." I smiled. "No." And with that, I turned away. Because Olivia was the past. And I was driving straight into the future. Success tastes different when you've earned every ounce of it. When I first walked into that dealership, now my dealership, I stood in the center of the showroom and let it sink in. The same floors Daniel Carter once strutted across like he owned the world, now they were mine. The same glass-walled office where his father made billion-dollar decisions, now my name was on the door. I could have taken a victory lap, could have sent Daniel a message just to rub it in. But I didn't, because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about building something real. 6 months later, Lux Performance Tuning wasn't just a name. It was a movement. We redefined what high-end car service meant. I hired the best mechanics, not corporate puppets, but real car guys. People who actually cared about what they worked on. We expanded, opened a second location in Miami, then a third in Los Angeles. And the waiting list? 6 months out. Ferrari owners, Lamborghini collectors, even celebrities. We had built a brand, something Carter Prestige never could. Because we weren't just selling luxury. We were selling passion. Then came the final twist. One evening, I was going over expansion plans when my receptionist buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's urgent." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "If it's a reporter, tell them I'm not interested." "It's not a reporter," she said carefully. "It's Richard Carter." I sat up. Now that was interesting. I met him in the lounge. Gone was the untouchable billionaire image. He looked older, more worn, like a man who had been fighting battles he knew he was losing. He didn't waste time. "I want to buy in," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me. Your company." He exhaled slowly. "I want a stake in Lux Performance Tuning." I stared at him. The man who once sat across from me, thinking I was beneath him. The man who built an empire, only to watch his own son burn it to the ground. I could have laughed, could have thrown him out of my office. But instead, I leaned forward. "Why?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because you won." I let that sit between us. Then I smiled. "No." Richard frowned. "No. No." I stood up. "I built this without you. Without your name. Without your money. And I don't need you now." He clenched his jaw. "I could still be an asset." "Maybe." I shrugged. "But you didn't see the value in me before. And now? You don't get a seat at my table." He studied me. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Respect. Not because of my business. Because I didn't bend. He stood, straightening his jacket. "You remind me of myself when I was younger." "No," I said. "I remind you of who your son was supposed to be." Silence. Then, with a short nod, he turned and walked out. And just like that, I closed the final chapter. 1 year later, we celebrated the grand opening of our 5th location. This time, in New York. Emma stood beside me as we cut the ribbon, cameras flashing, industry leaders shaking my hand. And in my office, hanging right beside my Entrepreneur of the Year award, that $100 bill. The one Daniel Carter had tossed at me like I was nothing. I kept it, not out of spite, but as a reminder that no matter how far I came, no matter how much success I earned, I would never forget where I started.